Soulframe has had its first official dev livestream and the reaction has been relatively muted. But we did get information about the launch window, so let's jump in, let's talk about what they showed, and let's talk about why people are feeling a little bit underwhelmed. So the devs did their first official stream at TennoCon, which was basically a dev panel that was on stage at TennoCon, which is the convention for Warframe. Typically, that's how Digital Extreme started. And they spoke a little bit about the inception of Soulframe and the vibe, the concept art, and all that kind of good stuff. They said that they are acutely aware of what they did with the name, the Soulframe name obviously being linked to Dark Souls, but they've repeatedly said, don't expect that same level of difficulty. It's sort of Dark Souls if it was a casual co-op game, I think. But before they actually got on to showing the new stuff, they did reveal that the first prelude is going to be coming this fall, which is autumn for people who aren't in America. Which, to be fair, I think we sort of already expected, because they mentioned it was coming in 2024. And, well, I mean, there's not that long left in 2024. Before we start talking about the reasons why this presentation wasn't necessarily overly well received, let's talk about some of the things that they showed off in it. So it starts with them showing the prologue intro trailer, I think, and the start of the character creator, which appears to be some questions that your mother is answering for you. And it's done in a very sort of like fairy tale way where you're picking the end of a poem. That sounds mental, but it looks cool. And then there's a time skip and they start delving into some of the actual features of the game. So one of them is the Night Hold, which is basically a central hub that you can go to at any time as long as you're not in combat. When you're there, you interact with some NPCs, your ancestors, and you will craft items, view the lore, change your weapons, do your character customization with your skins and all that kind of good stuff. It looks like part of the game is to actually collect more of these ancestors into your Night Hold. And your Night Hold is this sort of like dreamlike environment where it's a very thin sheet of water where everything is and there's no end, and it looks fantastic. And you know what, I actually really like the theme of Soulframe, this sort of fantasy vibe with a little bit of an alien twist, as they put it. I really like it. It's unusual, but it's familiar. And I really like the vibe of Soulframe just overall completely. I think it's fantastic. As I said, the Night Hold is where you're going to do some of your crafting. Each sort of person looks to be effectively a different station that will craft different things. One thing they did speak about is how your arm, yes, your arm is basically your class. I'm assuming that you start with your class and that you can't change it later. But you know what? I didn't actually hear them say how that works. One of the stations that they showed off was this French lady, and she is going to be, I think, basically like an apothecary, doing like elixirs and maybe colours for your outfits. As a British man, I really enjoyed the Scottish accent from the main narrator, but the French lady, I mean, far too French for me. That's a joke. I love the French, really. And then we get to the reasons why people didn't really enjoy this update. And it probably starts with the combat. Now, that's a little bit strange for me because the combat is the thing that makes me interested in the game. But when I looked at Reddit, when I looked at Asmon's reaction and stuff like that, the combat really was getting slated. And I think it's the choice of enemy. So they have this boss called Nimrod, who's like this mythological figure. There's a history with the word Nimrod, by the way, that effectively it used to mean somebody who was powerful and good and grand and stuff like that. But then people started using it sarcastically. Like, who does he think he is? Nimrod? And then Nimrod just gradually became an insult. Anyway, Nimrod is this boss, and the fight with the boss doesn't look all that hot. I don't think it looks necessarily like completely awful or anything like that, but it doesn't look that great, I think, in comparison with some of the previous combat that we had seen. The game is also a little bit jarring. Like, I don't know how many skips there were in the game, but it's very hard to tell why something is happening. Like, Nimrod is going through different phases, there appears to be time skips, and you're not really getting the narrative, so it ends up being confusing for the viewer. Now, maybe some of that are things that you'll understand if you've played Warframe, but that's no good for me. A lot of things that the devs were speaking about on the stage sort of seemed like they expect you to know a bit about this game, which I don't, because I've never really properly played Warframe, and I think that's a little bit jarring, and hopefully you won't have to have played Warframe to understand this game. I don't think you will, but obviously if you're on stage at a convention that is pretty much created by the existence of a previous game, Warframe, then they expect the players to be familiar with Warframe. That all makes sense. I don't have a problem with that. I just hope eventually that people like me will be able to enjoy it as well. And the game itself isn't confusing. Like, I'm not sure why I was confused. I'm not sure if I was confused by the fact that they were skipping around in time, or the boss fight itself just wasn't very clear what they were doing and things just weren't overly explained. I don't really know. So I think the two main reasons for this sort of like underwhelming response is the fact that the game itself was sort of confusing in its narrative. Like, things weren't necessarily explained. Maybe the devs were actually supposed to say what they were, but they sort of overran a little bit at the start by talking about things that I literally didn't care about, like concept art and all that stuff. But you know, maybe some people do. But it felt like they were a little bit short on time and maybe rushed the bit that would have been more interesting, at least in my opinion. But yeah, they had this sort of like strange narrative that was hard to follow. And then the actual combat with the boss, it just didn't seem as good as the previous combat that we had seen in videos and gameplay features and stuff like that. And I think that's the reason for the underwhelming response to the game. However, there's another question that is relevant at least to this channel, is what kind of game is it? And the devs early on actually did sort of address it. And when they called it what they called it, which is something like an action combat online multiplayer game or something like that, they never used the phrase MMO. And honestly, I don't think it's going to be an MMO, in the same way that I don't really think that Warframe is an MMO. When I mention that, if you try and define what is and what isn't an MMO, you end up going down like foolish paths, like, is Fortnite an MMO? Obviously not. Is Rust an MMO? Oh, that's getting a little bit more questionable. I think with MMOs, it's pretty simple in that it's not simple, but when you see one, you'll know it. And when it's not, you'll know that as well. I don't think Soulframe is going to be an MMO. I think what it is that there's possibly going to be like a little hub area where you will see other players. There will be an open world, which I think you will traverse and quest alone. Like, I don't think you're going to see 100 people trying to kill Nimrod at the same time. And then there's going to be these procedural dungeons, and in those you'll probably be doing it with up to 3 other people, so there'll be 4 of you in these dungeons. And that's where you'll maybe show off your fashion game, which I think is quite popular in Warframe. So if you're expecting like a traditional MMO, probably this isn't going to be for you. But if you're expecting decent action combat, even though I appreciate that maybe this dev stream didn't convince you, but I think the combat will overall be pretty decent, and you like the theme and the vibe, which I do, then maybe this is a game you should check out. And as we said, you're going to be able to check it out this year. What's important as well is that this is going to be free to play. So in a sense, there's no reason not to try it yourself. Let me know your thoughts. Did you watch the live stream, and what do you think about the footage? I don't want to be rude about the live stream, but when they were talking about the different sort of like concept arts that they did, I just didn't care about it. Like, I'm so sorry, but like, I just wanted to see the game and find out more about the game, and they spent like 20-30 minutes talking about the origins and stuff like that. A little bit of a snooze fest, I do apologize. That might make sense if you're a hardcore fan, but at the minute, the only hardcore fans would be Warframe enthusiasts, who are pretty sure they're gonna like Soulframe. For anybody else, it just felt a little bit weird, I think. Like, it just, like, I'm not in love with the game yet. I've not even played the game yet, so I'm not ready to deep dive into concept art and all the lore yet, because don't really know that much about the game ultimately. Hopefully we'll find out soon. For now, let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Big shout out to my Patreons. You guys really support me. Thank you very much for that. And I'm going to be streaming on Twitch. At the minute, I'm not playing anything. I'm just sort of talking about Ashes of Creation and the MMO genre, because I have no MMO to play right now. So come and talk to me. I'll be there. We can talk about anything. Soulframe, your love life, whatever you like. Maybe not your love life. I'm not sure it exists. Oh, burn. I'm joking. Love you.